So here's the thing. This one might be a little bit sensitive today because we are talking about dementia and euthanasia, but that's the whole point of analyzing literature, is to be able to have conversations about some serious topics, but in a digestible way. So, let's jump into some Quicksilver. Before we get started, I want to say a quick hello and welcome all. This is Eclectic Kelpie, where we dive into the treasure trove of fantastical media. And if you want to jump into the psychology of Kingfisher like he is a portal of Quicksilver, then plunge into that subscribe button to join us on our adventures. Now, this is going to have a lot of spoilers in this video, so if you haven't finished Quicksilver yet, proceed at your own discretion. But with all of that being said, let's dive into the episode. As always, we're going to start off with some terminology, so we have operational definitions for everything we are going to be talking about today. So, firstly, dementia. Dementia is a generalized, pervasive deterioration of cognitive functioning. The loss of intellectual abilities is severe enough to interfere with an individual's daily functioning and social and occupational activity. And then Alzheimer's, which is a type of dementia, is a progressive neurodegenerative disease characterized by cortical atrophy, neurological death, synapse loss, which is the connectors that receive messages from other neurons, so it is essentially like the mailbox of information within your brain, gray matter deterioration, and significant decline in functioning. Gray matter is the soft tissue in the brain that contains a large concentration of neurons and dendrites, which receive information for the neurons as pathways of processing thought. Gray matter grows along with you through your life, and as it develops, we create schemas or social scripts for faster processing. So when gray matter deteriorates, with the progression of dementia, the brain is decreasing in density and loses its ability to process, and it begins to die. So essentially, gray matter is the largest soft tissue mass in your brain, and it holds all of your executive functioning. So that's what primarily your prefrontal cortex is made up of. So that's where evolved thoughts come from. So when you lose your gray matter, you lose your ability to process. Of course, that's just one component of processing, but it's higher thought, not oh, I need to eat, so your brain gets a signal that you have to eat. It's oh, here's my daily routine, or here's my ability to objectively understand the world. And then lastly, euthanasia, which is the act or practice of painlessly putting to death a person who is suffering from a painful or incurable disease or incapacitating physical disorder, or allowing them to die by withholding treatment or withdrawing artificial life-supporting measures. So with all of that, my assertion for Kingfisher is that the mental struggles that he is facing due to the Quicksilver slowly taking over his mind is a parallel for somebody who is experiencing severe cognitive decline due to dementia, specifically in Kingfisher's case, Alzheimer's disease, as well as he's asking to be euthanized as part of his care plan. So dementia is categorized by quite a number of symptoms, but for the purposes of specificity within Quicksilver, I'm just going to list off a couple that pertain to Kingfisher and his particular mental struggles. So a couple of symptoms that are indicative of dementia are personality changes, inappropriate behavior, being less interested in other people's emotions, withdrawal from work or social activities, aggression, and hallucinations. Now for the evidence of these symptoms relating to Kingfisher. Firstly, people constantly throughout the series are saying he didn't used to be this way, he's changed, he's becoming a different person, all along those kinds of lines. So particularly on page 287, Ren says, "I have to believe that he's still in there somewhere, the person I once knew, not this cold, shut down version of himself." So again, repeating that he's changed, he's no longer the person that he once was. The next piece of evidence is aggressive outbursts that Fisher has. So anytime he is not wearing the medallion that's protecting his mind from Quicksilver, which would be considered some form of medication, so without that on, he has aggressive outbursts. Particularly an example I pulled from was on page 94, where Cyrus is observing him in such a feral state that bore little resemblance to the man that had scooped me off the floor in the Hall of Mirrors when she had been stabbed and was brought first to Yavelia. He is gnashing and snarling and just freaking out and not able to perceive what's going on around him, just having an aggressive outburst. Nextly, constantly disrespecting other people's feelings. So Cyrus, throughout the whole book, is apprehensive, which makes sense, about going through different portals and, experiencing this world, and he constantly just doesn't care and forces her to do other things. So, like, going through the shadow portals when she first goes to his house and then along to the war camp, and he just is really disrespectful as a whole to her. I've talked about it before in my review of this book as a whole. He just doesn't seem to care about anybody else's feelings but his own in terms of observable behavior, and that's what we're obviously going off of in terms of diagnostic criteria within this video. So doesn't seem to care about other people's feelings. He is also constantly withdrawn from society. That wasn't really by choice. So, though I will concede that this is slightly because of magical components, but this is a book with magic in it, so we kind of have to take everything a little bit with a grain of salt, but he is withdrawn from his community, so he doesn't like to talk about what has happened. He doesn't feel forthcoming with his experiences. When he talks about he has to go do any sort of side missions, he'll usually go by himself to do them, and more so just inner isolation and pulling away from his community. So yes, there's a plot reason for it, but it is happening, so I'm gonna count it. But that one is a loose point. And finally, a very cut and dry symptom that Fisher articulates experiencing is on page 498. Fisher states that he experiences horrific hallucinations due to the Quicksilver that is infecting his mind. And also a side point for just a little bit of levity, Alzheimer's is usually diagnosed around 65 and older. There are some cases of early Alzheimer's, but that's traditionally, it will be diagnosed later on in life. And Kingfisher is 1,733, so, Now we are going to discuss the conclusion that Fisher comes to regarding his illness, as this is a real-world conclusion that someone can decide to make. Kingfisher has concluded that he would like to be euthanized and has a plan for it once he can no longer control himself. I want to be very clear on this, is that I'm not going to make this a moral discussion whether somebody should decide to be euthanized or not. This is just talking about the facts of what Kingfisher has decided and what legally he is allowed to decide based on his experience with his mental health and his care plan with his medical team. This isn't meant to be a moral discussion around ethics. This is just meant to be a discussion about somebody's option to choose based on their experience with their care plan. So in Canada, a person with a terminal medical condition can request medical assistance in dying as a part of their care plan when meeting the eligibility requirements. And that individual will be tested to ensure that they have the capacity to make that decision and are able to give informed consent. This is determined by doctors using various methods, including written and verbal processing assessments. Further, on page 498, Fisher and Cyrus are having a conversation about how the Quicksilver that is infecting Kingfisher's mind is eventually going to deteriorate him so severely and completely that he is no longer going to be himself, and that he does not want to stick around to become a burden to his loved ones. He then informs Cyrus that he has enlisted Renfis to assist him in this decision. Ultimately, Fisher would qualify under having an incurable disease, as Cyrus does speak with the Quicksilver in Kingfisher's eye and does confirm that the Quicksilver cannot be extracted. It is deteriorating him from the inside out, and there is no cure to be had. The Quicksilver does inform Cyrus that it cannot be extracted, as it has become such a part of Kingfisher that to extract the sentient metal would kill both the Quicksilver and Kingfisher. Of course, this is only book 1, and it is a magical illness, so of course they're probably going to be able to find either a way for him to completely get rid of the symptoms and for there to be a symbiotic relationship between the Quicksilver and Kingfisher, or they'll just be able to like magically find a cure, and everything will be fine and there'll be a happy ending. But for the purpose of the conversation at hand and dementia being an incurable disease, Fisher choosing euthanasia is a viable choice for his care plan and the care option that he chooses in the book. That was my assessment of Kingfishers Quicksilver poisoning as a parallel for somebody with Alzheimer's disease. Of course, these were just my opinions and observations, but I welcome everyone to share their thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you all so much for watching. Everything with love, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye!